Hello everybody, welcome to a new video of JMSpeedshop. Today we're going to talk about my engine controls and sensors and systems I used to get this engine standalone running, because I got some questions in the comments about it. So I do a little bit explanation how I managed to run it. So it's much easier than most people think. So let's start. So I made a small list. So what did I use? So at first, if you look to I used a VEMS ECU. It's just an how does my pen is going down? A VEMS ECU. That's just standalone ECU. You can run up to 8 cylinders individually. Control them individually. So that's 8 injection inputs and 8 ignition inputs. So I got a V12, so in my engine case I got like 12 injectors on 6 inputs. So they are paired by 2 injectors on 1 input. For the rest, all the sensors I used was just throttle position, coolant temperature sensor, crank position, inlet, air temperature sensor, cam adjust. That's of course that's optional if your engine has it or not. These V12 engine all has adjustable camshaft on the intake. That's just an on or off. The amount of degrees I'm not sure how much it was, but it's just an on and off switch. I got 2 ignition coils. That's originally I got distributor ignition. So distributor ignition was on this M120 V12 up till 1995, around that number. So 12 injectors. They're just original. Wobble fuel pump. With an original fuel filter built it in the original housing. 3 cooling fans on 2 inputs and 2 wideband lambda centers. So my gearbox controller is an OfGear gearbox controller. You can find a lot of info about it on OfGear.dk. That uses 2 inputs. That's the APS sensor, that's wheel speed, and a throttle position. And if you have a turbocharged car, diesel or petrol, you can also have a boost sensor input. And why is that? Because the load of the transmission is then not controlled only by the throttle position, but also half, so 50% by your boost. So I'm using just a 722.6 shifter. You can use a lot of shifters, but a lot of types I mean. So mine is an ML. That has not the winter spot set button. I made another one, not in it, but you can use all the shifters. If you want to know exactly what shifter you can use, have a look on OfGear.dk. 722.6 transmission. It's a 5-speed electronic transmission, came on the market in 1995 in a W140. So that transmission I used is a 1996, I thought, CL600 transmission. Original also behind this engine. So that's the only that transmission, the 722.621, so 621 is the only transmission that fits behind the V12. So there are a lot of other bell housing that fit between different engines, like an M113 and M112 is the same, M103, M104, M102 are all the same. The CDI engine have the same bell housing and all the inline engines are a lot of the same, but with this bell housing will only fit behind this V12 and not behind the newer V12s, like the M137 and the M275. That's the V12 that came after this one, share the same bell housing, so that's also a different control. So where are my sensors? So the cooling sensor and the camshaft position are under here. That's the original position. So my input is controlled by, like the camshaft position is just 2 sensors on 1 input on the ECU. So it's just on off and it's switched ground to 12 volts. So all the injectors are paired. I have the numbers on paper which one are paired, but it's a certain pairing you need to use. So every time you have 6 injectors further that you pair with the other one. My intake temperature is here. Intake temperature is just before the intake manifold. My crank position you cannot see, but it's reachable when I take this plate out, but it's just just in front of the bell housing of the transmission. That's the original position. This engine normally has two crankshaft position sensors. I just use the original one, one of the two, and the other one is spare. So they are both looped into the car. Just put another connection on it. It's an inductive sensor, so not a Hall sensor. So it creates a little voltage frequency. So not a Hall sensor. A lot of people attempt to use a plate on the front, so they have a different crank position sensor on the front. I don't know why people do that, because it's 62 timing on the crankshaft originally. So this engine does not have that plate, but in 1995 they changed over to a different flywheel, and there was just a 62 flywheel setting on it, so you can just use that. So I don't know why people using different kind of camshaft of crankshaft sensors. Look, I have another engine here. I don't know if you can see that. This is an M113. You cannot see that, but you can see here it is also the crankshaft position sensor, and that's in here, and that's also a 62 knots. So that means you've got 62 and 2 of them are not there. So crankshaft position sensor, throttle position sensor is down below here. There's just one sensor, not on the other one. So how does my throttle bodies work? So I have the main cable, this going to the throttle pedal, feeding this cable. When I pull this one, the other cable pulls the second throttle body, and that's how it works. So the lambda sensors under the car, of course. Fuel pump also. So ignition wise, it's just an original setup. So to keep it simple, I just have 2 distributors on the exhaust camshaft, normal position. One cable is coming out, as this one is going to my ignition coil. I bought these new. There are just the original ignition coils from Bosch. They're still available. I bought 2 ones, and they're just a wire going back to the ECU. One is 12 volts and the other one is to the ECU. So the ECU always switches ground to ground. The other side also, so I'm using 2 ignition inputs for the ECU and 6 injection inputs. So I have 2 injection inputs left. I can do something with it. You can shift like a fan or something with it, and I had 6 ignition inputs left over. 1 ignition input from my ECU is blown. It just died because I had a brand new bad ignition coil. So that can happen. Why it happens I don't know, but I thought it was this one. That's also seen in the dyno video, that 1 ignition coil damaged my input. And you have to use another one. So, for example, if you have an 8-cylinder and you're using all the inputs, then you have just a very bad day, because you don't have a spare ignition input. So they can be repaired, but you cannot do it straight away. So the only thing I needed to do was switch over a wire to another input, select it, ignition output I mean, and select it, and then use that one for that cylinder bank. What's for the rest? The transmission wise, the ABS sensor I'm using, this car does not have ABS, so I have the front spindles on the front are from an SL500 R129. I also have the brakes from an SL500. Those brakes are the same as on an Evo. Evolution cars have also the bigger brakes, the 300mm. They are also from an SL500, same size, same calipers. I also use the spindles on the front because the wheel bearings are bigger. So I just think it's just better because the weight is higher and that sort of stuff. But those spindles also have an ABS sensor input on it. So I just bought an original SL500 ABS sensor. That one is connected to the OfGear TCU. So also the throttle position input is wired through. That's going into the ECU, so it's wired through to the OfGear TCU. So my throttle position is also used for that. So the OfGear only uses 2 inputs and the rest is just from the transmission to control it. So all the wires, what I did with the electronics is to take, I have two separate fuse boxes. So I got the original fuse boxes over here. That is now only controlling everything outside the engine and the transmission. So lights, everything else is all original, all the wiring is all original. And everything else that has to do something with controlling of the engine or the transmission, I'm using a separate fuse box. So the wiring loom is also separate. So nothing is wired into each other, because that doesn't make it any easier. If you want to do some, for example, you have problems in 10 years or something, you cannot find anything because you wired everything through. So that's not, I think that's not handy. So at the front, 2 fans. These fans are on 1 input. I got one on the back. That is also on 1 input. So at this moment, the cooling capacity is still enough. So I will see how much is in the summer. So it can be that I have to change these 2 fans because their output is not very, very big, and change them for also for a Mishimoto fan that's over here. So in the car, I have the ECU. So in the car, so I have my ECU wired up underneath here. I hope you can see that. There is the VEMS ECU. You can see it here. That's the VEMS ECU wired in. There's my fuse box. The plates can still be in front of it, but I have to make nice fitment, so it can also be easily removed if you want to have something checked. So I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 relays for all kind of stuff, and 15 fuses. 1 is not used. That's over here. 1 is not used. 14 fuses. So the Gearbox Controller. Look if you can still see it. The Gearbox Controller, you can see in the back is there. That small fuse that you see, the 10 volt fuse, the 10 amp fuse over there. That is that's the fuse for the transmission controller. So for the rest, everything is wired in. So I have the control panel over here to control everything. What else can I tell about this system? Yeah, I got a wire here. This is my communication cable for the ECU. So, but yeah, my experience with it now after driving, you're not going to do anything with it when it's running good. Sometimes I'm checking that sort of stuff. I was running with the laptop control to it. When I didn't have the oil pressure sensor yet connected. There were a lot of people asking, you don't have any oil pressure? I had oil pressure, but it was not in the view because I had a laptop on my passenger seat and viewing that, because the sensor I had in there was an oil pressure sensor from 0 to 8 bars. So it was connected to the ECU because I wanted to know if it was giving full pressure the first time I started. So that's what, and it was. This engine has 5.3 bars of boost pressure, of oil pressure when it's cold, and then it's flowing over. And I just want to see if it was every time the same view. So I changed that sensor now to the sensor. So that's just an original sensor from, I think it's VEMS, and those are only giving 0 to 3 bars, and above that they don't have any signal. So that's working. I got it connected to the dash. About my RPM signal, the RPM signal from the tachometer is also just on an input on the ECU. The VEMS ECU can just control that, and it's just adjustable. You can adjust it to the same RPMs that the engine is reading out, or the ECU is reading out from the engine. My speedo is a W126 speedo. I think this is one from a 6-cylinder, a 280 SE, I thought. So those speedos are electronic. So if you change your transmission to a 722.6 or or to a manual, you got the same problem. Because later models, I think after when the 202 came, I don't know for sure, but this got electronic speedo signals to their new dashboards. So the old dashboards, only the V8 models in the W124 and the W126s had electronic speedos. All the other cars had all cable speedos from the transmission to the speedometer. So if you want to change that, or you change the transmission, you don't have a speedo cable anymore. So the option at the moment I only know that exists is that you switch over a speedo to a W126. That's something that works. I also did it. In a W201 it works perfectly. In a W124 you have a problem because these two connections are over here. So the clock and you're putting to 0 from your day counter, mine is also not working anymore because it's not connected, but my clock is still working. In a 124 they are both not working anymore, so you can also not time your clock. So that's that's not very nice. Transmission wise, you can see that I have an ML one, so I don't have a spot switch. I had it already in, so I don't want to switch it over, so I'll put a separate switch in there. Controlling wise, I really like the setup. This transmission is very nice. The only thing I need to do now is when it's warm enough, you have to get the transmission temperature up to 80 degrees to get if you want to change something to your shift firmness. That's the advice that Ole from OfGear told me. If you want to change something to it, then your transmission needs a premium temperature. Otherwise, when it's colder, it will not have the same. It doesn't feel the same. I'm only going to do it for the W setting because the S setting is just a sport setting and I don't care how far or hard it shifts. Now if I go above a certain throttle position, I still feel the shifts a little bit. So I want to change it a little bit, not too much. But I'm very pleased with it. If you want to switch to a 722/6 transmission, I can just recommend it. I'm going to do it with my next car also. I think it's just, I'm really happy with it. It drives very good. You just have to, my advice on that is just try to have a transmission that's clean and always have a look if the valve body is clean and your solenoids are working and that sort of stuff before you connect it. Because if you got any faults with it, you know that your transmission is okay or it's just a wiring issue. Just try to have it as clean as possible. Pedals also very nice. I drove a lot of AMGs. For the people who saw my playlist have seen I drove a lot of cars with pedals, and I think this is the first car that I really use them because it's just they are also very fast when you shift with them. So in all the other AMGs it's just a software issue. You have to shift 500 RPM before the red line, otherwise you're going into the rev limiter. So that's not that nice. So I hope I covered some of the information people wanted to know. If there are still any questions, just ask me about them. A lot of stuff is just original. So, show what is aftermarket. So, the throttle position is just an aftermarket sensor, cooling temperature. I just bought a new one. I think that's also, you can also use the original one. Intake air temperature is an aftermarket one. So, crank position is original. Camshaft adjustment, solenoid is original. Ignition coils is all original. The cables, everything is original. Some parts are renewed, of course. Injectors, I put new O-rings, new caps on it. Also original injectors. I thought they were 255 cc's original. I think they were good enough in this engine to about, what was it? 550 horsepower or something with a V12. I calculated it. Fuel pump, I'm not sure what it was. There was also good enough for 650 horsepower of fuel. Cooling fans, the original on the front are just Chinese cheap ones. I'm never going to buy them again because I don't give enough air. But with the other Mishimoto fan on the back, it's good enough. So for this car, maybe for some cars it's good enough, but I'm just don't going to buy them again because they don't give enough airflow. And this one on the back was about, I thought, 80 euros or 90 euros, and it's just perfect. So they work on smaller cars, but I cannot advise them. Lambda sensors are just Bosch wideband lambda sensors. The ABS sensor is original. Throttle position is the same as on the engine. Shifter is just an original shifter. Gearbox also. Only thing I did to the transmission is the 3 to 4 shifter flare. I drilled a little bit bigger. All the info is on OfGear.dk. So, hope you liked all the info. Maybe what also is nice to know, air filters are Apache air filters. I also used them on my car from a few years back. It's just a very good filter. There are some tests on the internet that's showing that these filters are have the lowest restriction as an open air filter. A lot of people also think that I sucking in warm air. When I'm standing still in traffic, that's fully true. But when I'm driving, there's more airflow coming through the engine bay than the engine is using. That's my conclusion, because when I'm driving with a laptop, my intake air temperature here, the sensor picking up, that temperature is only 1 to 2 degrees higher than the outside temperature. So when I'm stopping, this is hot and my intake is still very cold. So these holes are working very good. So and I needed them because otherwise it was sucking in hot air. So that's about the engine controls. So if there are any questions about this subject, just put your comments below the video. And if you want to subscribe to my page, see more, there's in your right corner for you, there's my logo. Click on it, go to my main page, and just ask if you want to know something. So hope you liked it. Look in the playlist for all the other videos and driving videos from this project and all the other reviews. And don't forget to subscribe. And you can also have a look on JMSpeedshop.com. Thanks for watching. See you for the next one. Bye bye.